Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and the last video I will be uploading for the year of 2023, and it's going to be a format prediction video. So, past tier lists, I've always done like actual tier lists of like where I think the decks lie, but going into 2024 and having just gotten a new ban list that will go into effect as of January 1st, 2024, we don't entirely know where the format is going. There's very solid speculations on where certain decks are going to lie, but overall, it's just primarily predictions and seeing where things end up, because we have some really good cards coming out in the new Maze and in Phantom Nightmare. So the next 2 months in general are going to be very exciting, and then most likely we'll see another ban list in like April or May, something like that. So going into the next format is going to be certainly interesting. And so I'm just here to predict. I'm not here to give solid solid information. So so for our tiers, we have like the best decks. These are the best decks in the room. You'll see these at your regionals, getting getting the toppings and all that, winning the events. You got strong strategies. These are, again, decks that are going to be at the top tables, probably getting toppings, probably not winning the events most of the time. They'll win one here or there. These will win, you know, your locals. You'll see these just very good strategies that you won't be paying an arm and a leg for, hopefully. High potential. These are decks that, thanks to the ban list and cards coming up, they have potential to do a lot of good stuff, but there is also that chance that they won't do much. So I didn't really know where to put this tier, because this is more of a tier for decks that have the very, very good potential to see some good outcome, but also could end up just doing nothing. And then needs a good pilot. These are decks that you'll see them at your regionals, you'll see them at locals, but the only way they're doing well is if the person knows what they're doing. And then there's just don't play these decks. If a deck falls in this tier, just don't play them. It's not worth the time. So let's just jump right into it. To start, we have pure branded Despia. You know, we saw it get top 4 in YCS Bologna, and it didn't get any hits on the ban list. Gimmick Puppet Nightmare still very much a thing. However, on top of that, we're seeing Bystials played a little bit less, but probably going to see them played also maybe a little bit more, because with Joshua Smith's win at the YCS Bologna with the Bystials, he has sparked a lot of interest in the Runic Bystial strategy, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But so because of that, Gimmick Puppet could be just soaring easily or doing really badly. But on top of that, we probably will see a rise in DD Crow in the next format, because there just are a lot of graveyard-focused decks in the next format. So there's a good chance that Gimmick Puppet Nightmare as a strategy for Branded will not do anything. So we need to see good pilots for Branded. That being said, I still think this deck is a strong strategy. You can take this to your regionals and you'll see some toppings easily. Taking it to a Nationals or a YCS might be a different story. You need to be a very good pilot to take it to a YCS and get top 4, like our good friend Victor. But if you took this to a regional and you know what you're doing with the deck, you'll be fine. The deck is still very strong, very consistent. As long as it resolves Branded Fusion, that's just the card reads win the game. So if you don't ash the Branded Fusion, you know, you just lose. So Bystial Runic, I think this is going to be a strong strategy. I can't say it's going to be the best deck in the room, and the main reason for that is that Bystial Runic is primarily a Bystial deck to an extent. Bystials see a little bit more play when the format is not primarily light or dark, and we are going into a heavy fire dominant format with Fire Kings and Diabellstar, and because of that, Bystials will probably be a little less prevalent. But also on top of that, we'll talk about it in a minute, but Labyrinth is going to be seeing a lot of success this format most likely, and if that is the case, then Runic, being a very good matchup against Labyrinth, will have very good results against Labyrinth. So it's kind of like a rock, paper, scissors scenario where if you're going against fire dominant stuff, you're going to struggle. If you're going against Labyrinth, you're going to do very well. So I think because of that, Bystial Runic has that potential to be one of the best decks in the room, but it also depends on how many fire decks are running around in the room, or how many Labyrinth is running around in the room. So it's just very dependent on the scenario. Centurion, this deck, I will die on this hill, doesn't do anything. I don't think this deck is very good. I think this deck, yes, does some cool stuff. However, it relies heavily off of Calamity. It does win games without Calamity. I'm not going to say that it doesn't. However, I just, again, don't think without Calamity this deck does anything worthwhile. So I think it's a strong strategy, and as far as I'm aware of, it's not getting any newer support in the upcoming sets. So I think this deck is still a strong strategy. Again, you could take this to a regional, get some toppings. You could take this to a YCS and possibly get top 32. It's very possible. I don't think this is by any means one of the best decks in the room. Branded Chimera. Chimera is interesting because Chimera is a heavily graveyard-focused deck with Sword Knight and Cornfield really like being in the graveyard to get off their effects, so you're not using bodies on the board. And they're also getting support in Phantom Nightmare, which is basically like Spellbound mixed with Battle Fader almost. And the deck has potential. The problem is the deck's main strategy is rip cards out of the hand, and that's just not really something that matters in this current format because you kind of want stuff in your graveyard in this current format. And then on top of that, the branded line is just branded. It's just Albaz, essentially. I think this deck has high potential. I just think the current pure branded has a lot more going for it in this current format until Chimera possibly sees a little bit more play because the new guy is searchable, which is, I think, a very good one of in the deck. Blonderies, I'd say, has high potential. The deck is basically just Floodgate.txt. It does a lot of good stuff. However, we all know the counters. Zombie World, Lancia, just prevent them from getting that shit back to their hands. It's a very counterable deck. However, it does see a lot of potential, and also it wasn't hit on the ban list. So I would have to say that this deck has high potential to do very well, but there's, based off of the upcoming sets, it could just get blown out. Swordsoul, I think, is a good strategy. However, I think it needs to have a good pilot at this point. I keep saying over and over again that, like, this deck's been doing the same thing, same end boards, but at the end of the day, Cheng Ying plus Chi-Chao plus Blackout, or Baron plus Chi-Chao plus Blackout, or Cheng Ying plus Baron plus Blackout, they're good. It's a good end board. It's a very strong end board, and the deck has a good draw potential and recursion to just be able to have hand traps and all that. And so, like, at the end of the day, the deck does good stuff. I just think it needs to have a very good pilot, and I think we saw that shown very well at last year's Worlds, that this deck can do things. It just needs to have a good person at the wheel. Sky Striker, I think this current ban list benefited Sky Striker, and I don't think enough people are talking about Sky Striker enough. So Engage is still at 2, which is unfortunate for the deck. However, Mind Control just went to 3. Widow Anchor is at 3. Snatch Steal just came to 1. Change of Heart is at 1. This deck has just, like, kind of a lot going for it. And then Upstart Goblin's at 3 as well. This deck has a lot of ways to just steal shit off your opponent's board and use it for yourself. And on top of that, it is getting support, I believe, in Maze or in Phantom Nightmare, one of the two. I think this deck has very high potential to come back and do some very good stuff. Also, on top of that, Orcus support like Harp Horror and Ib just came off the ban list. So there's a potential that Orcus Sky Striker could come back and do some stuff. I'm going to put this at the highest end of high potential because I think this is our highest potential deck to do some good stuff. Because, again, the deck has a lot of benefit to just stealing your opponent's monsters and using it for your own link monsters. And there are very good support cards coming out for the deck very soon. So I think this deck can do some good stuff. We'll just have to sit and wait and see. Exo Sisters. This is interesting. I think I'm going to have to put this also in high potential. Exo Sisters is doing nothing different than what it's been doing for like the last year and a half. The thing is that Exo Sisters is one of those decks that does very well in a graveyard-focused format that doesn't involve Tearlaments. And I think Exo Sisters is going to do very well in this format because there's a lot of graveyard moving in this format. So I think Exo Sister has the potential to do some stuff. They might even be able to find some new neat interactions with some other cards. It just really depends. However, there's also the chance this deck just doesn't do anything because everyone knows the strategy, it knows where it's going, and it's very easy to just kind of blow through it. Fire Kings, I think, is going to be the best deck, one of the best decks in the room. Fire King, Sinful Spoils, Fire King Tri-Brigade, just pure Fire King in general. This deck is going to be insane, especially with the upcoming support in Phantom Nightmare and in Maze. Bonfire is going to be an insane card, especially with Fire King, Sinful Spoils. This deck is just, it's got a lot going for it. There's a reason that on opening weekend of the YCS Bologna, the deck got a lot of top 32 toppings, because the deck by itself is already very strong, and then with the Sinful Spoils package, it does very well. So this is going to be definitely one of the best decks in the room, and one to prepare for when you go to high skill events like regionals, nationals, and your YCSs. Infernobles, Isolde being like the biggest thing for the deck just got banned. And I think because of that, this deck is hurting a lot. Now, I know there are Infernoble players like Pack who are experimenting with the deck, trying to make it work without Isolde, and I'm sure they're making headway. However, I at this point have to say it does require a good pilot. Isolde was kind of just the big extender of the deck. It got you places, and it got you to what you were going for, and it got those equip spells into the graveyard like Phoenix Blade, and it just kind of helped the deck function. Without it, the deck is going to hurt a lot. I'm not saying the deck is completely dead, but it is going to definitely notice the fact that Isolde is banned. So because of that, I think that the deck needs a very good pilot, like, say, Pack, who's been playing it for a while, or even other, like, pro players, or even just, again, someone who knows what they're doing and has been playing this deck for a while. Next is Kashtira. So Unicorn just came to 3. Fenrir is still at 3. Arise Heart is still banned. And I think the deck is just not something to trifle with. This deck is actually incredibly scary. It does some very good things. It just sets up really strong boards, like control boards, Unicorn, Fenrir, Birth, and just maybe some like rank 7s and stuff. The deck is very powerful. Fenrir alone is just a force to be reckoned with. But on top of that, Unicorn being on the board does also provide that extra threat, because you don't want some of your one-ofs in your extra deck to get ripped, like, say, SP Little Knight. And I think because of Unicorn coming back to 3, we might see more people running 2 Little Knights rather than the 1, which we already see a little bit of, but we might see more of it. But also on top of that, this is a rank 7 turbo deck, so you do have like the Dad Xyz card, you have Big Eye, you have plenty of other rank 7 Xyz that this deck can just summon and blow your entire board up. This deck is not something to trifle with. It is something to definitely respect. However, at the same time, it is not going to be the best deck in the room. This deck is manageable to play around. It does hurt from consistency issues, which I think the 3 Unicorns is going to help tremendously for. But the deck, again, at the end of the day, doesn't have their boss monster, so they are going to be hurting a little bit. And if you are smart and know how to play around the deck, you can certainly defeat it. So respect it, but don't be intimidated by it. Labyrinth, I think, is arguably going to be one of the best decks in the format. I keep saying this, and finally, I think my words have finally hit the world. This deck does good stuff, and the upcoming support of it's not even direct support, but the upcoming card Transaction Rollback is going to make this deck absolutely insane. You get ashed on the big welcome, and you can just go Transaction Rollback and try again. This deck is going to be incredibly powerful. Being able to set the Transaction Rollback and even activate it turn 0 is going to be very powerful. It's going to make the deck very hard to navigate around, but also very hard to beat. But this is also, at the same time, it's a hard deck to navigate playing. So if you plan on playing Labyrinth in the next format, you're going to want to pick the cards up now. Like, the deck is somewhat expensive thanks to Big Welcome being like $60 to $70. But however, the rest of the cards are fairly cheap, cheap-ish, thanks to the tins reprinting most of the cards except for Big Welcome. I would severely say get your hands on this deck if you plan on playing it and learning how to play it very soon, because this is not a deck you can just pick up and play and see results with day one. So this deck is going to be very, very powerful in the next format, and if it's not, I will be genuinely surprised. Manadome, I think, is going to be a very strong strategy. I don't think it's going to be one of the best decks in the room, simply because Shifter and Droll are still at 3 and very legal. And I just think Manadome can never truly be the strongest deck in the room, and if it is, then we have a really weird format going on. The deck does some good stuff, however, it does play a small handful of bricks, which can cause very bad hands. And then the deck does just die to Droll. It severely hurts from Shifter and has to re-navigate how it's playing through its end board, or playing to make an end board with Shifter active, and the deck just doesn't like the two most prevalent hand traps in the format. So I think, again, this is a very strong strategy, but it is never going to truly be one of the best decks in the room. Marincess, I think it's a very strong strategy. You could take this to your locals, you could take it to your regionals, and you will see a lot of success. Marincess does constantly get tops. It is a deck that does very good stuff, and it does those things very well. However, it's just a deck that struggles to do anything at a YCS. I think the deck does need a good pilot, but at the same time, even someone who just picked up the deck yesterday could probably see some results at a regional. So the deck is not super hard to play, but I think to get very good results, it needs a good pilot. And that's really all I gotta say about Marincess, honestly. Mathmech, don't bother. That should be self-explanatory. Their one-card starter just got banned. I don't know what else to say. Don't play this deck. I've been saying don't play this deck for like 4 formats now, and now I'm truly meaning it. Like, don't play this deck. It's not worth it anymore. Mikanko, honestly, I kind of just have to say don't play this deck either. I think Mikanko does benefit from the fact that Snatch Steal is legal. It can search Snatch Steal because it is an equipped card. However, I just don't think that one thing is going to make the deck any more playable. The Acid Golem trick is still very legal. You can still do it. I just think that a lot of the decks in the format that are getting a lot more support coming up, like Fire King and even Labyrinth and stuff like that, are just going to be able to stop you from doing that. And then again, the deck severely dies to Droll and Lockbird, which I think is going to very quickly make its way back into everybody's main deck in this current format. So I'd have to go as far as say don't, but if you absolutely want to, make sure you're a good pilot at the deck. I think Mikanko has seen its glory days and peaked very early. Orchist, I don't really know what to say, because I wasn't playing the game competitively during Orchist's glory days. And I don't really know what the deck does. However, Ib and Harp just came off the ban list, so it is very likely that this deck could do some things, but I would almost say that if this deck does do anything, it's because it's splashed into a stronger deck. I know a lot of people are experimenting with Runic Orchist and stuff like that, so this deck has potential. I just don't know how much potential. I think we are long past the glory days of Orchist, but again, there is a good chance that if this is splashed into the right deck, this can do some good stuff. Purrely, I have to say, is like one of the strongest of the strong strategies. This deck does still do something. The one hit to Sleepy Memory, putting it down to 2, doesn't kill the deck by any means. It just makes it so you can no longer guarantee its search off of My Friend Purrely. However, at the same time, if you just don't see Sleepy Memory, it makes the end boards a little bit more difficult to navigate to, especially if you can't get to the field spell either. And then also you're just not drawing as often. However, Purrely is seeing some splash ability with Sprite and seeing competitive success with it, as we saw at YCS Bologna. Purrely is by no means dead, but I do think that because Purrely was already kind of on the decline, we were seeing less success. We were seeing less successes and also just less popularity with the deck as time went on. That I think Purrely's glory days are very quickly coming to an end. However, we're not quite there yet, and I would say that if you're still playing this deck, you're still fine. You will see some regional success. You might even see a YCS success. So, just know that the end is probably coming very near, because also stuff like Fire King has ways to pop the Purrely cats before they rank up into Exceeds. And then Labyrinth has ways to remove stuff from your board as well. It's just Purrely is going to have to very much fight for its right to be in this format. So, but still easily the strongest of the strong strategies. Rikka Sun Avalon currently, I would say, is not in a good spot, because it just saw a hit to Dryas and Healer, putting them both to 1. Dryas being at 1 is a major hit. However, I believe in Phantom Nightmare is the set it's coming out in. We are seeing a bunch of really good plant support that makes it so Rikka can resolve like Jasmine like 11 times in one turn, which is actually crazy. So I think this deck has very high potential to do some good things. Its current status in the current format, or sorry, its current status before the support comes out is not very good. However, it won't be very long before the support does come out, and this deck is doing some crazy stuff again. So I'm going to put it in high potential. I'm not making any promises, but the new support is actually crazy. So just kind of keep your eye out for the Aurora Mage support, I believe is what it is. But this deck has really high potential to just be absolutely insane without 3 Dryas and 3 healers. Dragon Link is interesting. So Dragon Link just got Ib, which does actually make the deck do some really cool stuff. However, the deck is also, just like Bystial Runic, relying off of Bystials primarily. And if you are going against a fire deck, you're not doing much with those Bystials. So it's more of not only just format dependent, but it is very heavily based off of matchups. So I'd have to go as far to say this deck has potential with Ib, but I don't think this deck is going to be doing anything absolutely crazy. Honestly, we'll put it, I think the deck still is still very much one of the best strategies you can be taken to a regional, possibly even a YCS. But I don't think you're going to be winning a YCS or topping a YCS with Dragon Link. You could probably still top and possibly even win Dragon Link or win a regional with Dragon Link, but I don't think a YCS level event Dragon Link's going to be seeing a whole lot of success. Sinful Spoil, Snake Eye, whatever you want to call it, is going to be one of the best decks in the room. Like the new support coming out in Phantom Nightmare is absolutely insane. Makes the deck just set up really insane boards. But on top of that, Bonfire is coming out in Maze, which just makes the deck incredibly more consistent by itself. I think the pure version of this deck, or even with the Fire Kings, is going to do astonishing things. And also on top of that, the deck just has a 3 of that's at $100 a piece, which I complained about that in my last video last week. Take a look at that. But no, this deck is going to be one of the best decks in the format. Like I said, we're running into a heavily fire dominant format, and this deck is one of them. So if you don't already have these cards, get your hands on them soon, because there's a chance they might be going up even more. So we're going to be talking about like both Sprite variants. So we have Runic for higher Sprite, which is, I think, going to be in a very good spot in this format. And then we have like Pure Sprite, which, because Sprite did just get its starter back to 3 rather than 2. But at the same time, a lot of decks have been just splashing Sprite as opposed to running the pure version of the deck. And even then, they were only running 1 starter. And even some pure versions of Sprite, like even before it got hit to 2, were only running 2. So I think like Pure Sprite would need a good pilot. The deck is still very strong and very powerful, very consistent, especially with the 3rd starter. But I don't think it's going to be making any crazy end boards other than like Ibly Pass or Click and Echo Pass, It's gonna be interesting to watch. Runic for higher Sprite. Like I said, Runic is in a very good spot in this format because Labyrinth is one of the best decks in this format easily. And if Labyrinth's one of the best decks, the best counter to Labyrinth is Runic, because it has just so much pop potential and interruption potential and recursion, constantly drawing cards and out-resourcing Labyrinth. And then also those banishes off the top. If you banish the right cards like Big Welcome Labyrinth, the deck is going to be very much hurting. So I think Sprite for higher Runic is in a very good spot. Very strong strategy. I'd have to put it above Branded. But I think the best Runic version you could be playing right now is still Bystial Runic. Tearlaments, I don't think is dead. As much as I would love for this deck to be just dead, no more existing. Despite the fact that Shifter still exists, Agito and Kelbeck are banned, as we learned from OCG, tier players don't know when to stop. They just don't know when to stop doing the mills. They don't understand that deck no longer go burr. And because of that, tier players are experimenting with other techs and experimenting with other stuff, so there is the chance they might bring like stuff like Revolution Synchron back, which if you don't have that card already, you might want to just buy it, because it might go up in price if tier sees success with it, because Revolution Synchron does get some random mills with its effects, and so I think the deck still has like high potential to do some good stuff. I don't think it's going to be one of the best decks in the room, even if it breaks this tier and goes into strong strategies, it's going to be at the bottom, I think. I think Agito and Kelbeck hurt a lot more than tier players are willing to admit. And so I don't think the deck is dead. I think it'll still be a strong deck, but I don't think I think the age of tiers is certainly no longer upon us. Rescue Ace, the 3 airlifter, or 3 to 1 really doesn't do anything to this deck. I think in terms of the fire strategies you could be running next format, Rescue Ace is not the strongest one, though. I think Snake Eyes, Sinful Spoils, or Fire King is definitely one of the better strategies you could be running next format, but I think Rescue Ace is still going to be a very strong, very consistent strategy. And the 2 airlifters no longer being in the deck, I don't think does nearly enough to the deck that Konami thinks it does. I hope I'm wrong, though. Unchained, Shavara to 1 hurts this deck a lot, and honestly, I kind of have to say just don't play the deck. I don't know if the deck is necessarily dead, but it's not nearly as consistent because Shavara being at 1 means that you cannot have a Shavara attached to Caesar and have a Shavara in hand at the same time to dodge effects on your opponent's board or on your opponent's turn, activate stuff to get your board moving on their turn. There are people trying to experiment with Ready Fusion and summoning out some like level 6 Fusion Fiend. I don't think that's the play. I don't think that's it, dog. This ain't it, bro. So I'd have to go as far as say just don't play Unchained. I think Unchained's definitely lived out its time, and it's time for it to, time to put the dogs down. It's a shame because this deck was really cool. I think this was one of the coolest decks to ever see meta success in a long time. However, I think Shavara being to 1 is easily the hit that the deck needed to die. So if you want to try and prove me wrong, if you want to experiment with this deck, because I'm sure plenty of Unchained players are trying to cope and fix that problem, you're more than welcome to. I just don't think the Ready Fusion strategy is it. Vanquish Soul, this is the deck that's been up and down. It goes from being like a really solid strategy to just don't play it. Vanquish Soul, I think in this current format can see some success because Fenrir is still at 3, which means they can still get 3 Fenrir and 2 Riseheart. They got support from Age of Overlord. The deck does do some good stuff. I think it is a strong strategy. However, the deck does severely struggle with the fact that they have to struggle with hand management because they have to have certain attributes in their hand, but also they struggle with having the right attributes in their hand sometimes. However, Ghost Spell is going to be easily one of the best hand traps in this format. Ghost Spell hurts a lot of the most powerful decks most powerful cards in the format. It hits Wanted of all things. And because of that, Vanquish Soul just plays Ghost Spell in general. Yeah, Vanquish Soul just plays Ghost Spell in the main deck, whereas a lot of these other decks will probably be playing it in the side deck. Vanquish Soul just plays it in the main because it's an Earth attribute. So I think Vanquish Soul is going to be a very strong strategy, but it still has its issues, its barriers that it constantly struggles with to begin with. So I think that's what's going to hold it back from being one of the best decks in the format. And that's really it. Like I said, this was like predictions. I by no means know how the next format's going to look, but based off of the stuff that is coming out in the upcoming sets, there's a good possibility that a handful of these are correct. Out of everything, I'm the most confident with the Labyrinth call. I think Labyrinth is going to be the if not one of the best decks in the format, with transaction rollback becoming a big problem of a card. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Maybe I missed a deck. I thought I was pretty thorough this time around, but I may have missed one by accident. But let me know in the comments below. Also, you all have a wonderful new year. We are 9 subscribers as of recording this video. 9 subscribers away from 1,600. I broke 1,500 a month ago, so if I could break 1,600 in a matter of a month, that would be absolutely amazing. So if you are not already, don't forget to leave a like and definitely subscribe for more competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content. I'm trying to upload some more locals videos to the channel next year sometime, so keep an eye out for that, and I will see you all in the next year.